Restaurant Unstoppable, inspire, empower, and transform the industry. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, the author of Restaurant Strong, the first principles of restaurant outperformance, Peter Lazar. My man, Peter, are you feeling unstoppable
Eric,
today?
I am. I've got a lot of energy for hanging out with you today, and you just served me a great cup of coffee, and I'm just jived to talk to your team.
I'm excited to have you, man, and I really did enjoy your book. I should have held up the book as I was reading the title for the camera, but it's right here. Again, Restaurant Strong, the first principles of restaurant outperformance and how to make them work for you. So a little backstory, like you reached out to me to let me know about your book,
Yes.
and I after just looking into the book, and I think you sent me a PDF of the book as well, and I think I don't remember how I saw it, but like in the first chapter, I think I remember opening it up, and I think something about the introduction is what caught me, and I was like, I want to get this guy on the show because the very first words in your book are bridging the knowledge gap.
Right.
And that struck a chord with me because that's exactly why we're here. We're here to bridge the knowledge gap between the industry's most successful restaurateurs and the next generation. So I'm like, okay, this guy and I are aligned. I knew from the very beginning. And funny enough, so it was a week ago that I first reset. Like when I
went
said
to for this trip, yes, a week ago.
it was even a week ago, was it?
Yeah.
It was like less than a week ago, or just
Yeah.
exactly a week ago.
right around there.
I was like, "Are you available next week?" And I just came down to Tampa, and in my mind, I knew that I was gonna have to read 2 books over the next 7 days.
You're amazing.
I mean, a lot of people do that normally, but that's hard for me. I'm the guy that reads with one finger on the page all the time, but I powered through. I made it to the last chapter. I did not finish the last chapter, but I made it through almost the last chapter. And I loved this book, man. I really did.
Well, I appreciate that. That means a lot.
But in the back of my mind, I was thinking to myself, like, okay, I'm going to fly down, and the day before and during the flight down, I'll have time to go through and read the book, and I'll figure out your entire life story, and I'll know exactly the restaurants you owned and operated and the businesses you were a part of, and you don't mention it in the book. So I'm sitting here, and I know all of your values, a lot of your beliefs, but I still don't know who you are. And we spent the day together today, and I still don't know who you are because every time you started to tell me, I'm like, don't tell me yet.
Right.
I don't want to know. I want to know.
It's a funky story.
Yeah, I want it to come out. I want to be curious. I want it to come out organically during the podcast. So I'm finally getting to pull back the layers on you.
So I kept them out of the book so you wouldn't know my backstory by the time we came here. That was the whole purpose.
So I'm excited to finally be able to dive into it because I feel like I like to ask questions and take an interest in people when I meet them, and I haven't been able to do that with you yet. But before we dive into who you are and to why you wrote the book, let's get that motivational, inspirational, ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
So taking from this idea of the knowledge gap, the mantra that I use for myself is that actually there's a lot more that we don't know about our own spot in the world than we even realize we don't know. So as an example, right, if you're a coffee shop today and you have an individual coffee shop, you probably know 1% of what Starbucks really knows, right? Mm-hmm. And me as a first-time author, I probably still only know 1% of what Malcolm Gladwell knows about writing a really great book, right? And we have to keep that level of what we don't know in the top of our head in order to keep trying to make that journey, right?
Yes. And I'm listening to you talk. I'm pretty sure I wrote in the margins of your book, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know anything. And that is like one of the biggest lessons I learned when I thought that, like, oh, I'm going to start a podcast.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to like 100 restaurant owners,
Right.
and I'm going to have all the secrets figured out.
Yeah.
And then I got to 100 episodes. I was like, maybe it's going to take another 100. And I got to 200 episodes, and I'm like, maybe it's going to take another 200. And I'm at 850 episodes now, and I'm still just like, I have ideas, I have thoughts, I have beliefs, but the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know anything.
Well, and the amazing thing is it's not just about things that are external to our life experience, but let's just talk about Joe Rogan. There's something that Joe Rogan learned that is that, and of course you're in a very niche industry, but there's something that he learned that is something you can observe to keep crossing that bridge to higher levels of audiences and so forth, right? And I had to look to our restaurant leaders to really understand what those gaps are that we don't know, right? Because too many of us in this business, and I was one of them, sort of think we know most of what we need to know, and the truth is, to get to those next levels, we are falling short.
Yeah. And the other, I think, thing that kind of that's tied to that is you start to learn things and you think you have an answer, and then before you realize it, you start to hear the complete opposite as a truth.
Yeah.
And then that seems to come up time and time again, where you hear something and then you hear something that's the complete opposite, and you're like, which one is it? You know?
Yes.
And the truth is, it's all right sometimes. Depends on who you are and what your values are and what your objectives are, which is not completely the solution to that, but I feel like that plays into it. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I mean, if we're just talking big picture without any examples yet, a lot of times the truths of the day are the truths of sort of marginal outcomes, because so many people are believing in the same thing,
Yeah.
right? That you can't stand out. And that's when all of a sudden somebody comes along and shows us a new truth, which, oh yeah, that's actually true.
Yeah.
But they're out on their own, right? And I know we're going to get into some of that today. But that's a plague on our industry. And again, I fell for it as well. We see all these models that are performing more or less like ourselves, and we believe what they're doing is truth, but we're not getting better results than we want.
Well, for the longest time, the only place you had to go to get answers about how to be successful in the industry was from somebody who was in the industry who was successful.
Yeah.
But they just copied and pasted the person before them and so on for about 100 years. So we're still operating the same we have been for like a century, or literally a century. You know,
Eric, this is gonna be fun.
Yeah. So like it's weird. Like
Yeah,
I think,
totally
and this is just the success quote and mantra. We haven't even started to dive into who you are
Yeah.
and how you got to this point to be able to collect all this information.